Is the infrastructure bill going to lead to much more spending but not much growth? You came here for the truth. That's the question on everyone's mind today. This infrastructure bill looks like it's going to go through. It might be held up. We'll see what happens, but ultimately this affects you. We are seeing these packages going on around the world, in fact, and the governments are trying to invest in the future, they say. But if you break it down a little further, you start to see that it's not all what it claims to be. The first thing I want to discuss is the infrastructure bill, everything surrounding it. The second thing, the dollar devaluation. Stay tuned for that part of it. I know it's going to be interesting to you. I'll give you a little bit of insight there. And the third thing, if you make it to that part of the video, the markets are waiting for something. What is it? Let's talk about that. Let's go. There's an interesting article out of the Wall Street Journal that's talking about the infrastructure bill, and they make some points. I don't necessarily agree with everything they say, but I wanted to highlight something here. Infrastructure bill's boost to the economy is likely to be limited. And the point I wanted to stress is that economists say the short-term economic lift will be minimal. So they essentially make the claim that when you compare it to what they saw with all of the relief programs that were put in place, it's minimal. Look, the bipartisan infrastructure bill is unlikely to have a big impact on growth in the next 5 years. Longer term, though, investments in highways, ports, and broadband could make the economy more efficient and productive. At least that's what they're saying. The short-term boost to growth will be relatively limited for two reasons. For one, the bill represents just $550 billion in new spending. So you see $1.2 trillion, but ultimately they're showing us here that it's $550 billion in new spending. Still a big number, okay? Compared with the nearly $6 trillion that Congress had approved in the past year and a half because of the whole issue that was going on, right? So big difference in numbers there, obviously. The infrastructure spending will take place over 5 to 10 years starting in 2022, a longer timeline than, of course, the emergency initiatives like the stimulus checks, the extra unemployment benefits, and small business support programs, the PPP loans, you know the whole deal. This will make its direct effects on employment and demand less noticeable. So right there, that's really key, and that's going to help us out with the third section, okay, of this video. But let's now talk about this. What is really going on within this infrastructure bill? Well, the largest single item in the 2,700-page bill, which on its own is crazy, is the $110 billion for roads, bridges, tunnels, and other major projects. So out of that $1.2 trillion that you're seeing, traditional, when you think of infrastructure, the roads and bridges and so on, only $110 billion is for that. Then you go in a little further, $66 billion being passenger and freight rail, $39 billion public transit, $25 billion to the airport, $17 billion for the ports and the waterways. But I need to stress this here. This is how much they intend on spending. It's not as if $110 billion is going directly into the roads. No, it goes into those departments, and then by the time it actually makes it down to the roads and the bridges, you get just pennies out of it. That's the way this system is designed to work. They mentioned something in here, and I think I covered it in one of the further articles, but let's just talk about it. All of this spending will be a boon to the construction machinery companies if they can handle it. Industrial and construction activity has been booming and supply chains are stretched. Quote, we are already seeing stronger, heavy construction activity. It's something we saw in the second quarter. It may continue to improve. That's Caterpillar, okay? How the $1 trillion infrastructure bill would direct billions toward tech spending. So what I'm trying to highlight here is obviously what's happening, but we'll talk about in the third section, who's going to benefit from it most. Investors, keep that in mind. The bill includes funding for several technology infrastructure items, including broadband access, electronic vehicle charging stations, and cybersecurity. It also includes stricter tax reporting requirements for crypto transactions to help pay for the various programs. Isn't that the case, right? They're going to make it all okay. Don't worry, your taxes aren't going to get increased. Sure. Well, inside of this bill, two things were in there. Number one, we're talking about the crypto regulations. And number two, we are talking about the taxing for every mile driven pilot program. It's not in yet, but the pilot program. Now, I wanted to show you this. I think it's really important. Global demand isn't booming. So why are shipping rates this high? How could that be? Global demand only up 3%. Well, we get into it right away. They tell you what's happening here. Maersk, who's basically, the top dog in the shipping industry, they are saying that the global container shipping demand was only up 2.7% in the second quarter versus 1 year ago. Isn't that interesting? And they say it right here. There's a lengthy, albeit temporary spike in congestion compounded by a localized stimulus and savings-driven demand boom in America. So part of the supply chain constraints, what's happening at the ports, what's happening with the truck drivers, all of these different things are impacting it, and actual global demand isn't that high. Now, isn't that interesting? So different than what you would see coming on the news and so on with all the analysts. Only a quarter of office crowd now working from home. So everything that has led up to this point has created a structural shift in the way that people do business, in the way that business is organized. And I think this is going to disrupt many different industries going forward. Infrastructure is definitely important, but ultimately this bill isn't going to fix the structural problems within the economy. Number two, the 2,700-page infrastructure bill contains many secrets hidden inside. Two I've already discussed, which is the crypto regulation, as well as the tax for every mile driven. As people start digging through it more and more, there's going to be more ugly truths coming out. Number three, there are many companies that will benefit from this infrastructure bill, so investors, keep paying attention. Okay, so let's take a look at this part of the video. The small business optimism dips in July as labor shortage remains the biggest challenge. Yes, this is absolutely something. You see the amount of job openings being crazy. People are telling me from all over the place that they are seeing the exact same situation, signs up everywhere. They can't pay them enough or give them enough incentive to come around. This is the NFIB Business Optimism Index, and that has declined. Of course, this is always going to fluctuate. I can show you over the 10-year. It's right now approximately 100, and you could see the direction it's been going over the last few years. This is a volatile index as well, but it just gives you a little bit of insight. I think it's probably better to see, you talk to a lot of the different businesses, see the quotes. I think you get a better perspective around it. This article out of Wolf Street talks about inflation, and this is hitting people where it hurts. I know it is for you, for everybody. You're just seeing the combo of massive QE, repressed interest rates, huge government stimulus with borrowed money, and raging inflation is new in recent history. They talk about all the different companies, including Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Kimberly-Clark, General Mills, Unilever, and many others. Automakers talking about that, and here that basically just saying, even in his own experience, that everything has gone up. Every cost that he has risen. And this is, of course, is unsustainable for people and their disposable income. It's not a good thing. It has a temporary boost on the economy, though. The GDP might go up, but that's not a good thing long term. In-person gamblers lifting U.S. casino market to its best year. So you've got people right now that are either really, really desperate, so they need to be going back to the casino, or they have a lot of extra money for whatever reason, and they're taking that to the casino. Maybe they were doing so online previously, and regardless, this is literally the best year right now for casinos. Is crazy. And now we look at what's going on with the stock market. Stocks rise on earnings, energy-led gains. The earnings season that is now winding down has bolstered the case for stocks. So for those who aren't aware, if you're going to do any sort of short-term trading, it is generally advised to not do so around these earnings reports because it can be very volatile. Even if you know it's going to do very well, sometimes the market just sells off on that news. So if you're a long-term investor, different story. You wouldn't be affected by it, or you wouldn't necessarily buy or sell during that period. But it just shows you that right now, throughout this period, we have seen these stocks that are kind of trading within a range, depending on which one you look at. But overall, I mean, I could show you right now really quickly. This is the S&P 500, and it is up over the past, let's say, week or so. But look at the NASDAQ as an example. It's basically around the same level it was on July 7th. So it's been up, it's been down. I think that the markets are waiting for this period of earnings. And now that everything is A-okay, they can go higher, especially if that infrastructure bill gets passed. That's what they're waiting for. Tech drop exposes doubts in US growth optimism. Like I just showed you in the chart, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I think that's really important to get all of these things past, the debt ceiling raised and so on, so that there's nothing to worry about until the Fed taper, of course. Quote, we may start seeing the market price in higher infrastructure spending as investors try to get ahead of the game. Sector ETFs that have cooled in recent months on the back of growth uncertainty related to industrials, materials, construction equipment, semiconductors, and electric vehicle arenas could see a boost as the bill gets passed. If the bill gets passed, and they're just talking about particular ETFs, they're talking about Caterpillar and so on, all right? This is interesting. Home builders are restricting sales, pushing up new home prices. Have you ever seen that before? What about bulldozing homes? You remember that? And then this one right here is just talking about, I thought it was interesting, wanted to include this for you, that if a home is done, ready to go, move-in ready, it sees a premium on the price because people are worried about construction costs, they're worried about delays and so on. Just keep that in mind. This is just telling you that Jerome Powell might be out. He's not dovish enough. So they might boot Jerome Powell out. We'll see. Don't worry, they'll replace him with somebody else who's exactly like Jerome Powell. Amazon awarded the $10 billion NSA cloud computing contract. Yes, that's right. Does it matter though? I mean, of course, that's going to be great, probably for their stock. But I mean, the NSA, Amazon, Apple, all these different companies, they all work hand in hand. We know how the funding of a lot of these companies like Google began, but it's all just another day. Look, that brings me to this point here, and that is these systems that we're working through, that we're watching this through, ultimately don't want me to be talking about this and don't want you to be hearing it. And that's why I set up the insiders. That's my own system. That's my own system to get to you directly. It is free, entirely free for you to take a look at. You can check it out for yourself. Sign up here at this card or at themoneygps.com. In order to support this channel, all you got to do is hit that thumbs up button. I really do appreciate it. And if you haven't seen the video already, you definitely want to watch it. Click it and I'll see you there.